Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. What a nice intro. It is a pleasure to be here with you tonight, and I'm super excited to talk about a little bit about my experience and share some top tips for you girl dads in the audience. Can you guys see me, or are you just hearing me?
We can see you.
Oh, okay. Um, awesome. So a quick background. I was a Chronolite graduate in 2002. I was a two-sport athlete. Played soccer and softball. Was blessed to be a Cougar during some really wonderful times in athletics. And on both teams, I won 3 national championships. I was on a soccer team that was the national champions for 2 years in a row. And I was fortunate to be voted senior athlete of the year. So had some very wonderful times at Crondolet. It is very near and dear to my heart. And I guess I should have started with this. Grew up, my dad, I'm a self-admitted dad's girl. And I got all of my athleticism and love for sports from my dad. He was a college baseball player. He coached me growing up, and I was fortunate to have very supportive parents and a parent coach that I never really felt pressure from. And while we certainly had our moments, and to your point earlier, yes, I was a teenage girl once as well. So hopefully I could shed some light on that. I was blessed with a positive experience. After Trondelet, I went on to University of Redlands and played also soccer and softball. Well, at least that was my intention. My freshman year, I unfortunately broke my right fib and have had 3 surgeries since. So 4 surgeries in the span of 4 years as a college athlete. I also tore ligaments in my shoulder, so played 1 year of softball, unfortunately. And while that was certainly not the plan, it led me on this path to what I do now, which is mental performance. The road back to sport, the return to sport was incredibly challenging physically, but probably if equally, if not more so challenging mentally. And I didn't know what sports psychology was back then, to be quite blunt with you. I didn't know about it in high school. I didn't really know that it existed in college. And now that I'm in this field, man, I could have used it in high school and college. So I've devoted my career, my passions to working with primarily adolescent females, not only, but adolescents in general, on navigating mental performance in both sport and life. It's really important to me to, yes, talk to them and work with them as athletes, but more importantly as humans first. So a person-centered approach. And what that typically includes is sports, it's school, it's life, it's socially, it's emotionally, it's all of those things. So with the current kind of mental health movement in sports that's going on right now, as I'm sure you're all aware, athletes like Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, a lot of NFL athletes are expressing their challenges that they face with mental health being an athlete. There's a lot less taboo around the topic now, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I'm really excited to be here today to share a little bit about my expertise and my thoughts on how you can continue to support your daughters and maybe even make some changes in what currently takes place and how you support her mental health and growth. So with that being said, I'm going to try to share, I've got a couple slides just to provide some visuals, and we can go from there. So please let me know if this works. Actually, can you allow me to share, whoever's the host?
I'm gonna get off. Ew. Okay, guys, what do I do?
If you go to click on participants.
Oh wait, no, participants.
And then you should be able to make, if you hover over my name and click more, you should be able to say make host.
Okay, you're good.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So just want to spend some time sharing some top tips just based on my experience working with this age group and parents along the way. This, in my experience, is how we're typically taught to measure success in sport. How much playing time did you get? How many goals did you score? Did you win? Did you lose? One of the first questions I remember being asked, and that I still hear being asked today, is, did you win? And I thought nothing of it back in high school or back in my youth. That was just what we were asked. That's just what we knew. Did you win? And that, what I learned from that question and what our youth learn, is that, oh, well, winning must be the most important thing, because that's all everybody ever asks about. That's all everybody ever focuses on. And because of that, they learn to associate their confidence and self-esteem, that it has to come from winning. And not only winning, but in the validation of others. Oh, well, this person is asking me this question about winning, and that must be the most important thing. So if I don't win, they must not love me or think highly of me, or whatever it is. Now, I know that's an extreme example, but this is how we're typically taught to measure success in sport. And unfortunately, that's still plastered all over television and socially, and how we think about pro sports. And we see professional coaches lose jobs if they have a losing record. So there's a lot of reinforcement of this concept. And something that we can do in our own homes is try to rewrite the definition of success, how we think about success and how we talk about success with our kids and our families, on our teams, in our classrooms, et cetera, et cetera. Now, don't get me wrong, striving to win is a wonderful thing. And I certainly played sports with the goal to win the games. Absolutely. But what I've learned over the years is winning isn't the only thing. And understanding and adopting that as a youth, as an athlete, actually really helped me have a healthier relationship with sports, and a healthier relationship with who I was and what was important, and my self-confidence and self-esteem. So I've kind of started to put some thoughts together based on my experiences and conversations with coaches and parents and athletes. And this is not an exhaustive list, but in my opinion, this is a great start of a better way to measure success. And if you notice, actually winning isn't even on there, or playing time. Things like my mental health, my mental performance. Oh, I overcoming mistakes. I'm having fun. I think one of the first questions we should ask someone who steps off the field is, did you have fun? Can you tell me one or two things you feel like you did well? This starts to create a space where they can process their performance differently, instead of, oh, I'm always focused on what I did wrong, which I was like that. So I now know, in retrospect, the harm that kind of perspective can have. But looking at things like, am I improving? Am I working hard? Am I learning new things? Do I have a growth mindset? And that will kind of be a relative theme in some of the things I share with you today, is from a growth-minded foundation. But how can I approach success differently? And one of the ways to do this, and I can speak to this concept from personal experiences. I used to walk off the field and be focused primarily on what I didn't do well, the mistakes I made, the throw I missed, the bad pass I made, oh, my mark scored a goal, et cetera, instead of being focused on the maybe 20 or more good passes that I made in a soccer game, or the handful of great plays I made in the field, or the great at bats that I had. And there's actually been a ton of research. There's a whole field called positive psychology, which we're not going to dive into too much today, but it essentially tells us that having an optimistic outlook improves mental health, and it promotes success, it increases happiness. And if we can adopt a similar perspective in sport, it trickles over to other areas of life as well. And I find with the clients that I work with, when it comes to stress and anxiety, there's a similar level of stress, or a similar manifestation of stress and anxiety in sport, and taking tests, and sometimes in social encounters or group presentations in front of the class. So by teaching and encouraging and building awareness around someone's stress tendencies, how anxiety shows up for them. Do they feel like it's similar for them in sport and life? We can address it and, for lack of a better term, tackle it in all areas of life beyond sport. And a little bit of this, a little background of this is, with all of you in the room having adolescent females in the house, you can probably understand what I'm about to say. It's an emotional time. There's a lot of changes going on. There's a lot of testing of boundaries, finding independence, figuring out likes and dislikes. But to give you a quick, brief breakdown of what's happening developmentally, I'm going to speak specifically to brain development. There's two parts of our brain. One's called the amygdala. It's this little almond-shaped area kind of towards the center of our brain, and that is the emotion center. We also have this area of our brain up front called the prefrontal cortex, and that area is responsible for rationale. So like rational thinking. Now, I can imagine that you could probably think of a handful of times in your house when you have thought to yourself, I don't understand what she's doing, what she's thinking, what she's feeling. I just don't understand what's happening right now. And I don't understand why she's doing what she's doing. Trust me, I went through this and I didn't even understand what I was doing, or feeling what I was feeling. The reason these two areas are important is because this is the part of the brain that is not developed fully until we're 25, the connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So what that tells us is, let's speak specifically to athletics. Sometimes post-game responses are primarily emotional first before they're rational. So I messed up, I made mistakes, I'm not very good, we lost, I'm upset, etc., etc., etc. Instead of, as I was saying earlier, oh, well, I worked really hard, I made good passes, my positioning was great. Those are some of the other successes we don't sometimes allow ourselves to think of. So if you try to put yourself in a teenage girl's brain for a second, this is a little bit of what's happening and why sometimes things present primarily as emotional first, in addition to all the other bodily changes in puberty things that are taking place, which we're not going to dive too deeply into today. So I'll spare you that. So essentially, the power of optimism is a really important tool, but it's not always easy. It's trainable, but it's not always easy. And I find that sometimes it's human nature to focus on the negative perspective. And there's always this debate, this battle, is the glass half full or the glass half empty, which some people would say, that's a positive outlook or a negative. And my guess is your daughters in some way, shape, or form have a negative focus at times as well. There's negative what ifs. What if I don't do well? What if I mess up? What if I fail my test? What if I'm not good enough? And it's our job sometimes as parents, as the adults in the room, to try to recognize and help her break that thought process, even when she doesn't realize she's having it. It starts with awareness. What are the types of thoughts I have in certain situations? There's times with clients when we keep a self-talk log, and it kind of has sections like, okay, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And how does that then result in the actions that I have? Or what were my actions? And how does that result in how I think and feel? So building the awareness around what is taking place. And I know that I felt a lot of pressure in high school to do well athletically because I wanted to go on and play in college. And I felt a lot of pressure to do well in the classroom because that's partly who I was as a person, but partly because I knew I wanted to go on and go to college. And grades and athletic performance and success, reminder how we define success matters, but that stuff weighed on my mind heavily. And shoot, my 20-year reunion is coming up next year. And the things that I've seen change in the past 20 years and the amount of pressure our youth feel has changed astronomically. And unfortunately, the result of that is today's youth have higher rates of anxiety. So what we get to do, what we can do with that is recognize it. And the next couple slides, I'm going to share with you a couple tips on, okay, what can we do with negative thought patterns? How do I stop that? What can I do with it? And one of those things is known as positive reframing. So it's essentially, if we have this negative thought cycle loop, how do I break the loop and be able to break the cycle and change my thinking? Essentially, it's taking a negative thought or a negative statement and rephrasing it into something more positive. And I sometimes like to identify these positive and negative thoughts as negative thoughts being more self-defeating thoughts, and positive thoughts being more self-enhancing. And I know I can't see you, but if I asked you to, by a raise of hands, which one sounds more beneficial, I imagine all of you would raise your hands that self-enhancing is a better way to go. It's not always easy, but it's possible with practice, with conversation. And so where you can come in as dads is if you recognize this happen. Sometimes it's expressed verbally, sometimes we're able to recognize negativity in body language. Can I offer another perspective? And this is where the connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex matter, because sometimes as a youth, as a teenager, I can't yet get there. It's hard for me to get to that more rational way of thinking. So I'm thinking more from the emotional perspective. But with practice, with effort, with awareness, I can switch it to the other side, to the more self-enhancing side. So here's a couple examples. This is too hard. I can't do it. I can work hard to solve this. I'm a failure. I hear that one a lot. I'm a failure, or what if I fail? Instead, can we say, I'm a work in progress, or mistakes actually help me grow and learn, right? So much of our perspective is, I'm afraid to make mistakes. That is probably one of the number one things I hear teenagers tell me as part of their self-talk. I'm afraid to make mistakes. Can we create an environment where we're not saying go out there and make mistakes all the time, but mistakes are part of the process. So it's understood that this is important. Mistakes need to happen for us to learn and grow. Another great strategy we kind of like to call name it to tame it. In other words, another way I like to reference this is the concept of feel and deal. It's a cute little acronym, and it becomes really useful in moments when I'm just stuck in this negative thought loop and I can't get out of it. I need to feel what I'm feeling. I need to label it. What is it that I'm feeling and why? What are the physical and emotional symptoms? How are they presenting? And what can I do about it? Is this benefiting me? Is it useful? Is it realistic? Most of the time, it's not realistic. So can I rephrase things back to a place that are more self-enhancing and more realistic to what my current reality is? Another area and where a lot of these things will become useful, optimism, recognizing negative thought loops, is how the conversations we have with our athletes and our students, and how in the questions we ask. One of the biggest topics that comes up in the work that I'm doing with high school athletes is the dreaded car ride to and from games. So I wanted to spend a few minutes chatting about that today, and how it relates to some of the stuff we've already talked about. But the athletes that are dreading the car ride to or from the game is usually because there's a conversation takes place that they don't want to be a part of. And oftentimes it's about what you should do, what you need to do in the game, or after the game, what you didn't do, why didn't you do it? Now, spoiler alert, your daughter already knows and is already thinking about and already focused on what she feels like she didn't do well when she walks off the field, when she walks away from a test. I remember times when I was younger and I could remember a question I already knew I got wrong on a test. And I was really pissed about it, to be honest with you. And I was really focused on that instead of the 27 other questions that I feel like I did really well on. I was focused on the one thing that I felt like I really messed up. Um, and so I wanted to provide some tips on my experience and my conversations with parents and coaches and youth athletes on what we can do pre-game, what we can do during the game and post-game, and maybe what we should avoid doing. Um, can I express love and support no matter what? And as I said before, like winning, I'm not saying outcome is important. All I'm simply saying is winning and outcome are not the only things. So can I, if there's importance to your daughter to winning an outcome, can I support that? But can I also support effort and hard work and progress and learning and overcoming mistakes? Can I include that in the conversation? This is a big one. I coach youth soccer right now. Let coaches coach. Remember what my job is on the sideline is to be a supporter and uh, uh, bring positivity and encouragement and energy sometimes when we need that. I know that it was always helpful when we got energy from the sidelines. Exhibit positivity, and this is part of that optimism in what you say and how you say it and what you do, and your body language. Youth are intuitive and they pick up on that stuff pretty easily. And I think the biggest one is help her focus on her strengths and what she did well. Because like I said, if your daughters are like me, she walked off the field thinking, these are the things I didn't do well. And that, while there's some healthy perspective there, can I also focus on, okay, here's the few things that I feel like I did do well. And can I shift how I focus on mistakes? Okay, these are the mistakes I feel like I made. What are they telling me? What can I learn from them? And how can I take that learning and apply it in trainings this week and apply it in the next competition? So it's almost like we create this healthier mental checklist to process performance for both practices and competitions. The don'ts list might seem pretty obvious as you're taking a look at it, but try to avoid being super winning or outcome focused. Try to avoid coaching from the sidelines. I see this a lot in youth sports, especially the younger ages. To be honest, we get to a certain age and we tune out the sidelines. So if you're, especially if something's being said that she doesn't want to hear, she's tuned it out anyways. So if making sure what we're saying is something worth listening to, and I apologize that sounds harsh, but I see it so much, especially in the younger ages, and it's something that continually needs to be addressed. Like I said, avoid telling her what you feel like she didn't do well, because actually what you feel like she didn't do well and what she feels like she didn't do well might be very different things. So allowing her the time and space to process those things, and also in reminding her, well, these are the things I thought you did really well. And to the point about pressure, there's too much of it these days on winning. There's too much of it on our youth. So creating, kind of supporting and encouraging that really fun environment. Why do we play sports? Because they're fun. We want to encourage and continue to contribute to the fun of sports. And so I know this list isn't exhaustive, and there's probably some things that you're thinking of that should be on the do list, maybe should be added to the don'ts list, or vice versa. So I encourage you just to consider these concepts. And if there's a conversation that takes place on either car ride, consider how it takes place. And actually, one of the things I suggest parents do is ask your daughter what she wants. What does she want to talk about pregame? Sometimes the nerves are so heavy already for her that maybe she doesn't want to talk about the game at all. She wants to talk about something else. Or postgame, maybe, hey, do you want to talk about it right after the game, or do you need a little bit of time and space to process it yourself? I'm happy to share thoughts if you're willing to listen or want to hear them. But maybe you come up with a plan together and how to address and the pregame and postgame conversations, because I would venture to guess there's some aspects of it she wants to have. She wants to be able to talk it through and process it from a very judgment-free, supportive, safe space. before I get to the next slide, and kind of wrap things up, we are in such a unique position as parents because we get to see our athletes on the field as competitors. We get to see them at home. We get to see them kind of develop and grow. So we're in this wonderful place to facilitate and contribute to that. And I have no doubt that the girls at Crondelet are in wonderful hands. And hopefully today, there's there's been a couple of things that were brought to your attention that you can start incorporating into your daily life, and thinking about in your conversations and interactions with your daughters. And as I conclude, beyond the questions of, did you win? Or how can I rephrase that? How can I put more focus on, did you have fun? Tell me about your effort. Did you try your hardest? Our children should never think that our love for them depends on the outcome of a competition or their performance in it. So regardless of if they win or lose, if they play well or not, don't play well, these 6 words can change everything. I love to watch you play. That's it. Those simple 6 words can remove fear of failure. They can remove the expectations of success. They can remove seeking their source of confidence and self-esteem from outside sources, because those things can become paralyzers. And if we can address these things and support these girls now at this age and build a foundation of a healthy perspective on success, how to think about winning and losing, how to think about effort, have a solid growth-minded perspective, it will set them up for the rest of their lives in their conversations with future employers, in their conversations or in their presentations in future jobs, in their collegiate career, whatever that looks like, as an athlete, as a student, etc. I love to watch you play. It encompasses everything a parent gets to be for their child. And hopefully that is the lasting image you have. I love to watch you play. As I'm walking away from the field, I loved watching you play today and see where the conversation takes you. So with that, let that simmer for a minute, and please feel free to ask me any questions. I really appreciate your time. Here, my contact information. I would love to continue the conversation beyond today. My parents still live in the Bay Area, so I will be in the Bay for both upcoming holidays. So if there's an opportunity to connect, to chat, to discuss services moving forward, or connecting more with the Crondelet community, I am all for it. So thank you very much. I appreciate you all.
Katie, thank you very much. I thought that was great, not only for sports, but also for everyday things, whether it's academic or anything that our daughters may be doing. Just, I'd love to watch you do something or be supportive. I think it's really helpful. What I'd like to do is open up the questions, and I'll stand here and repeat them. So
Awesome.
if we can make that work. So any questions?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Got to have a question out there. So I thought so. I'll jump in. I think what really struck me is the drive home, because my daughter's still 15 and she just turned 15, so I'm still driving her to the games, back from the games. A lot of times I get shut up, I don't want to talk about it. Or geez, practice is really tough. So I thought that was really helpful. Anything you can think about when you're talking, if you're coming back from practice or you're coming back from something, what are the right things to ask? What are the not the right things to ask if you're just trying to engage in conversation?
Sure. Yeah, great question. And to be fair, I remember being 15 and giving one word answers a lot. So I understand the challenge of trying to have a conversation at certain times. I think just asking questions that I suppose don't feel like loaded questions. And I know that's a really ambiguous answer, but something like, tell me about practice. Like, what were you, where it can start with a very open-ended space. Sometimes when we ask closed-ended questions, we get single answers. And sometimes it's simply about timing. where we have to get a feel for, is this the time that she wants to talk about this? And sometimes it's not. And while I might want to talk about it and keep asking questions, it causes us as the daughters to kind of clam up. I don't want to talk about this right now. So it sometimes to me comes back to, can I have this conversation in a non-post game or practice setting where it's a very casual, hey, you know what, I've been thinking about this. I recognize there's times you don't want to talk about things, and sometimes it feels like I do, but let's come up with a plan together, because I'd still love to hear your perspective on that game or that practice or what you're learning or working on. But I also want to make sure it matches what you're looking for in the time you want it. Now, I can't promise that'll work. I know each of us are different. And sometimes it's just, I don't ever want to talk about it. While I can recall times in my life doing that, I think if you can create a space or a routine where we're checking, maybe it's everyone checking in, maybe it's a family exercise or experience. Let me check in on my day. Here's what my day looked like. I faced these challenges. I feel like I was able to work through them in some ways, or I'm feeling really exhausted, et cetera, et cetera. And we can kind of model what it's like to be able to process things and not feel judged because of that. So a lot of this comes from, I'm 15, I feel like the world's against me and everyone's judging me and judging what I do. And I'm very, very aware of what other people think of me at this adolescent age, pretty much starting from 13 to 19 or older. That's what we're thinking. I'm very, very aware of what other people think about me. And I actually just had a conversation with someone yesterday, where we were talking a little bit about middle school and the change that happens between 6th and 7th grade. Sixth graders go to 6th grade. Oh, I don't care about what people think. I still have a little bit of that elementary youth about me. And then all of a sudden something changes and I become very aware of what I'm wearing, what I look like, what I do, who's watching me, what they think of me, what I'm doing. And that doesn't really go away. So if we can create a space for our daughter to feel able to express those kinds of, I'm learning about who I am and what I like, but also understand that I'm trying to help her build a solid foundation and confidence and self-esteem, so that I'm not dwelling so heavily on all those other outside things. And one of the big exercises I do with athletes is talk about control, what's in my control and what's not in my control. So to come back to your question about how do I have that conversation with her, sometimes I can't control as the parent if right now is a good time or not for her to have this conversation, but I can control what I say, how I say it, and paying attention to that. Okay, maybe now it's not the right moment, and maybe I can express, all right, maybe we can check in on it later because I'd love to hear more about it, and we come up with a routine together. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. I know it's not a very cookie cutter thing, but there's certainly ways to go about it.
Helpful, thanks. Questions?
Sure.
Yeah, we got one back here. Now I'm deaf too, so I'm sorry. Oh, can you share the slides with us?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that'd be great. So yeah,
Yes.
we'll get them out to the group. So can you recommend any reading materials for the student athletes to deal with mental health issues and the pressures of competition and pressures of that they face with both school and performance?
Yes. Would it be okay if I provided a list and sent it out to you guys in an email
That would
along
be
with the
great.
slides?
Yeah. That'd be
Okay.
fantastic. You want to understand how they could deal with TikTok and YouTube, or you want it on TikTok and YouTube?
That may reach the better written in some cases. If you have those things in TikTok and YouTube, the form they like.
So I guess the thought was, do you have that on TikTok and YouTube where they can actually sit and listen to you in a more adolescent conducive form rather than
Sure.
rather than their dad sharing a list?
Yes, that's a really great question. I'm actually working on putting together, I haven't quite come up with a name for it yet, but um so for now, for until sort of like a support group where we can meet either virtually, but preferably in person on like a monthly basis, and be able to talk freely about these things. So we create a community of adolescent youth females, um, athletes or not, but a space where we can have conversations like this. We can provide information and resources and strategies and tips and tools for them to navigate this type of stuff, without mom or dad having to tell you, because I can totally relate to that. If my mom told me to do it, it was a terrible idea. But if someone else told me to do it, it was the best idea ever. And I don't know what that is. If I figure it out, I'll write a book and you'll all get a copy. But we do that as kids, and I don't know why. So I'll continue to dive in deeper into that. But yes, I'm actually on the cusp of launching some stuff that would be very specific to that question. So it is more adolescent friendly. They're in a room with peers and they feel relatable, and it's a space to kind of experience this stuff collectively.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other question? Yeah, we got a couple back here.
Versus going to college and playing, have they changed that? When you get to adult sports, that playing to win, how it's judged, how society judges by win or lose, is that different?
Were you able to hear any of that? Yeah,
No,
yeah,
unfortunately not.
as you get older, it seems to be playing to win becomes a little bit less important, changes a little bit because
More important than most adult elite sports, like you're measured on winning, right? That's the simple goal. But what Kate was saying was that we should change that for the teenagers, right? Generally enjoy the sport.
so I think the thought process is when you're young, you play to enjoy it, but your parents are forcing you to, or really driving to play to win, and you're really pushing for them to play to enjoy the sport. And I think just to add on that, I think as you get older, like you get old like us, you play sports to enjoy it, not necessarily to win. So how do you work through those different phases of life, and how do you drive those?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think to some degree, it comes full circle, because I'm still competing, but recreationally, and I like to win, but I'm not devastated if I do. I think encouraging your daughters to continue to be in touch with why they play, and what that does is, and sometimes why they started, because sometimes the pressure or the amount of time and effort and work that goes into being a competitive athlete can be exhausting, to be quite blunt about it, to be fair. So can we get back to why I'm doing this? What is it that I want? And if those things don't include, well, I still enjoy it, then we really need to take a step back and look at what we're doing and why we're doing it. Enjoyment should always be the foundation. And I think that's true for careers too. And I know sometimes we follow a career path because it was the option that was available, but never really wanted it to be that, and it can develop into things. But encouraging the fun of it, let's fun, and some of that comes from what the coaches are, their perspective, and what they're doing at practices and trainings, and emphasizing as well. I know I'm coaching a boys under 12 soccer team right now, which is a whole other ball game, but I don't ever talk about winning. I don't have to, actually. They're the ones that talk primarily about winning and what the score is. So it actually allows me the opportunity to talk about the other things. Let's focus on effort. Let's focus on working hard. Let's focus on learning new things and actually applying it in a game. Let's actually get you to listen at practice. That would be a huge accomplishment. But hopefully that answers your question a little bit, because you're right. There is a little bit of, it starts out as enjoyment. And if you ask, I forget what the exact numbers are, but they polled some several 100,000 youth athletes on why they play sports. And the number one reason was because it was fun. And the number two reason was because they got to hang out with their friends. And none of them really spoke about winning or scoring goals or playing time. That stuff is learned over time. And the more competitive things get, the heavier the emphasis is on scoring goals, playing well, hitting home runs, winning games. That starts to shift. And it's at those times where, if at the very least in our homes we're encouraging fun, then we need to encourage fun and enjoyment. Because in other places, the emphasis is more on winning and on playing time. And like that first slide I showed you, how we typically define success. So because it doesn't exist always in other places, it's important for us to make sure we're encouraging it and modeling it in our homes as well.
Thank you. We have one more question.
Yeah, I just
Awesome.
have a question, curious about your own experience with your father. Would you say that he was the kind of model behavior saying now was not the kind of approach, or was your experience, did you learn from your experience to be something different from life? I'm curious about how, in many respects, fathers are really driven and push their children to certain levels of success. They create such a negative impression on us. And some of those children are people like Mozart and Beethoven, who did then go on to achieve extraordinary things despite how they have with their fathers. So I guess generally the question is, at what point is a parent supposed to provide guidance to keep a child striving if they have a natural talent? That's not just for sports, but for anything. This natural inclination, things that are difficult, you want to kind of pull back or stop doing it. And it's a parent's role to say, oh yeah, sure, do whatever you want, I don't want to like damage. Or is parents' role to be engaged and say, you know, you have talent, you need to get through this patch.
Were you able to hear most of that?
Oh, bits and pieces.
Okay, there's zero chance I'm going to be able to paraphrase that, but it's a great question though. I think the initial part was, how do you, when you look back at how your dad treated you, as a father, how does that relate to some of the things you're talking about, and what experiences did you glean from that? And then, when you look at some of the driven parents, famous parents, I guess Mozart and some other people, their parents were really driving the kids. Where do you draw the line? How do you draw the line between pushing too hard and not pushing hard enough, and finding the right balance?
Sure. That's a really
Better than I said.
great question. My dad, having been an athlete, understood, I think, the processes and what it took to be a successful athlete, right? And I use that term successful loosely, because there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity to redefine success or add to the definition of it. And while I never felt pressured by my dad to continue playing, he never said, you have to play this sport. What the expectations that were kind of some spoken and some unspoken were, follow through with your commitments, work hard, be a good teammate. Those types of things are what are ingrained in me. And I'm not saying that sometimes our daughters need a little kick in the butt. I'm not saying that, because sometimes they do. And as their parents, sometimes you can recognize those moments more readily than they can recognize it. And I could think of my brother as an example. He didn't recognize he needed a kick in the butt, and kind of all of a sudden realized, wow, I actually need to work hard at this. And things changed for him night and day. I think where where we cross the line and pushing and encouraging them to kind of work hard and be the best versions of themselves crosses the line is if it becomes a chore for them, if they're not motivated, they don't want to do it. And it's almost like we have to say it's not easy, but I can't make them do it if they don't want to do it. So there either needs to be kind of a reality check that, hey, I'm not sure I even want to do this, so I'm not motivated to work hard. Or, oh my gosh, I actually realized that I do want to do it, so I need to start getting my butt into gear. As a parent, that's a really hard line to walk on in terms of, am I pushing too much? Am I not pushing enough? At some point, I reached a point where I didn't need my parents to tell me to work hard or get in shape, with the exception of the summer going into my freshman year in college when I had to be getting in shape for the fitness testing. I was more in denial that I was going to college than I was in awareness that I needed to be in a certain level of shape. And that really kicked my butt. So I learned my lesson. But most of the athletes that want it, you don't have to tell them to work hard. They just do. So if there's some disconnect there, then maybe that's worth exploring a little bit more deeply, and providing the support in terms of, regardless of if you continue with this or not. And I might, in the back of my mind, really want you to continue with this because I think you're great at it and want you to have a great future at it. But regardless of what I want, I support you. And sometimes that can take just a weight off of the shoulders of your kids. And even if we hear that from coaches too, I support you and I believe in you. And I recognize that sometimes you benefit from me pushing you a little bit, but let's just get on the same page. And to my point earlier, sometimes that conversation is about timing, but it can be as simple as a conversation to get started. So did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, that's really thoughtful response.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome.
Katie, thank you very much for I thought it was a great talk. Very helpful, especially as
Awesome.
some of us are dealing with adolescent athletes.
Mm-hmm.
We're all dealing with adolescents. So thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Of course.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I wish you could stay and have a beer with us, but that's just not going to work.
We'll have to schedule this in person next time. So I would be more than willing to have a beer with you guys right now. It sounds actually quite good. Yeah.
Okay, thanks,
that sounds
Katie.
great.
We'll talk
Awesome.
soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
With that, everybody, thank you very much for coming.